Yes, Geordies, welcome back to another episode. Hope everyone's well, but guess who isn't back? Alexander Isak. Alexander Isak has went AWOL, he's jetted off to Spain, he's went back with his ex, and this situation Newcastle find themselves in is just a mess. I'm going to say this, and this is all I'm going to say in this Alexander Isak situation. I actually wouldn't mind it if he come out and said, look, I wouldn't mind a move to Liverpool. That interests me. I wouldn't mind showing my ambition in going to Liverpool, but I'm under contract at Newcastle United. I'm going to do what's right with Newcastle United. I'm going to abide by my contract. I'm going to train hard, train well. If that move happens, great. If it doesn't, I'm happy at Newcastle United. I'd be like, fair play, Alexander Isak, fair play. You've shown your ambition, but you've also been respectful of your current and your parent club, which I think you should, because if you go AWOL, he's still getting paid. Any other line of business, you do not get paid if you go AWOL or refuse to work. That's the horrible thing. He doesn't have to act this way. A move can still be done in a respectful manner. And I'm sure each and every fan out there would probably agree with this, that if he just said, look, I wouldn't mind a move to Liverpool, but I'm here at Newcastle and I love it at Newcastle. I love the fans. And then those bridges wouldn't be burnt, but he's burning those bridges with the fans. And I think that's the most upsetting thing. So in this video, we're going to talk about Craig Hope's article, breaking down the key points, talking about where Benjamin Šeško might end up. And we've been linked to another two strikers, Premier League proven strikers. I'm sure that's Eddie Howe's three favourite words. PLP, Premier League proven. You go into Eddie Howe's Google history and the main search is definitely Premier League proven. So I have been linked to Ollie Watkins and Jørgen Strand Larsen. So as always, guys, I'm going to tell you about their style of play, how they can tactically fit in Newcastle United, but also comparing them to Alexander Isak. So firstly, let's break down the key points in Craig Hope's article. Firstly, he talks about Alexander Isak, because what else is there to talk about? He's forcing a move to Liverpool and he's now training at Real Sociedad's camp, which in my opinion is just completely disrespectful. There was talk about him being injured, now he's training. The whole situation is just a mess. But I've said my piece on it so many times, I don't want to regurgitate, otherwise you'll just get bored watching this. So we are going to be breaking down Ollie Watkins, Jørgen Strand Larsen, then we've also been linked to Rodrigo Muniz, which I analysed yesterday, and Johan Wissa, which I've already analysed. So again, I'm not going to repeat myself in these videos because it's time consuming for me, but also boring for you guys. So if you want to see those guys analysed, just go back on my video history. Then he talks about defenders situation. He said Leonardo Balerdi is still a target. Jorginho Scalvani is still a target. I've already analysed both of those players. So if you want to go and see those episodes, just go back in my videos. And then he also suggests that Mark Guéhi is unlikely, which I actually agree with, because I think Liverpool will go in for Mark Guéhi, but I think they're waiting for the close at the end of the transfer window to hopefully make Crystal Palace drop his value, because Crystal Palace are asking for 40 million and he's only got a year left on his contract. Crystal Palace won't want to lose him on a free next window, because let's be perfectly honest, they're not in a financial position to let a top asset go on a free. And we all know Ibrahim Konate has rejected a contract offer from Liverpool and there's talks of him going to Real Madrid. So Liverpool will want a centre-back this summer. And I've got a funny feeling that centre-back will be Mark Guéhi. So no, I don't think he's going to come to Newcastle United. And quite frankly, the way he messed us about last summer, I probably don't even want him at Newcastle United despite his quality. And then the one that baffled me is they spoke about midfielders. We've only got 5 and 3 of them are injured. But apparently, according to reports, a midfielder is not a priority. That absolutely baffles me. Now, one thing I will say on midfielders, we don't need to spend an arm and a leg bringing in a midfielder, because we don't need the finished article when it comes to midfielders. We've got Joe Linton, we've got Tonali, we've got Bruno, who do not need replacing this window. But we do need depth in midfield. So can we go and find an under 21 gem and sign him for next to 10 million? Just to bring in our camp now, have him as a rotation option, but by bringing him in now and having him in the squad now, we'll prepare him to step in when he's needed. And then the news that we all expected. Manchester United set Benjamin Šeško as a priority. I think, I'm not even going to say it, I think we all know what's going to happen. Benjamin Šeško is going to go to Man United. We've already presented our plan, our project to Benjamin Šeško, and he's still thinking about it. That tells me that he's waiting to see if Manchester United can match what Newcastle United have done. Put 2 and 2 together, guys. If he's taken this long to make a decision about Newcastle United, he's probably more interested in Manchester United. Now, one thing I do know is Manchester United need to sell to buy, and I think that's what Benjamin Šeško is probably waiting for. And then finally, we've had some clarity on our backroom staff. CEO looks like it's going to be David Hopkinson, and the sporting director looks like it's going to be Ross Wilson, according to reports. Now, once and if both of those have been appointed, I will do a video on them, talking about their background, talking about their roles and responsibilities at Newcastle United. But I'm only going to do that once they're appointed, because no, my look, I'll make a video and then on the same day we'll appoint somebody else. I know you're all going to slaughter me in the comments here, but one thing I will say about this window, I fully expect us to bring in at least one defender, at least one midfielder, and at least one striker. I think that is the minimum I expect. Now, we don't even need to spend hundreds of millions on those 3 players, but there's plenty of bargains around Europe that we could find. And I've already done videos on about 15 to 20 midfielders that we could sign, profiles that would complement Eddie Howe's system, but also complement our other midfielders. So what I'm saying is there's plenty of options out there. Buying Premier League proven players is just as much of a risk as buying players that haven't played in the Premier League. Because let me tell you one thing, and this is no secret, every player that reaches this level has ability. The reason why it doesn't work out at clubs more often than not is because they don't fit in the culture and they're not comfortable in the environment. But it does look like we're really going after a striker. So let's look at exactly what Alexander Isak brings us, but also comparing him and other strikers in the Premier League. So what made Alexander Isak so effective? He ranked first for all Premier League for touches last season for 1,025. So his involvement in the build-up play is absolutely exceptional. He ranked second for touches in the opposition's penalty box last season with 189. So not only does he get involved in the build-up play, he's also highly active in the penalty box. He ranked first for shot creating actions with 92. So it means he creates for his teammates, not only for himself. He ranked second for shots on target with 41. And he ranked third for XG, which was 20.3, and he overperformed his XG at 23 goals. I mean, so those statistics alone shows you what a complete and well-rounded player Alexander Isak is. So his profile, his ability is very difficult to replace, especially when you missed out on your top targets. All those players that we've been linked to are quite well-rounded. So what we're going to do is break down Ollie Watkins and Strand Larsen. Now, the first thing we're going to do is compare statistics. So these statistics are based on game involvement. So the first one is touches per 90. Obviously, the guy with the red has the lowest and the guy with the green has the highest. So when it comes to touches, Ollie Watkins actually ranked the lowest out of all 3, which I was pleasantly surprised about because I would have thought that was Larsen. So Ollie Watkins averaged 24.63 touches per 90. Alexander Isak averaged 33.46 touches per 90. Larsen averaged 25.60 touches per 90. But what have I consistently said in my videos? I want my strikers to have a lot of touches in the opposition penalty box. As you can see, Isak has the most touches in the opposition penalty box with 6.17. Strand Larsen has the least with 3.76. Ollie Watkins somewhere in between with 5.36. So again, it goes to show how much involvement Alexander Isak has in our play. And I was quite surprised by the lack of involvement Ollie Watkins has in Aston Villa's play, but we're going to be touching on exactly why very shortly. When it comes to shots per 90, said this before in my previous videos, I want my striker at least having 3 shots per 90. Alexander Isak is over that metric with 3.10. Ollie Watkins is averaging 2.7, which isn't bad. Larsen's averaging 1.8, which is probably down to Wolves' style of play. And again, we're going to touch on why he's having so less shots at Wolves in comparison to Ollie Watkins at Villa and Alexander Isak at Newcastle. But one thing I really do like about Strand Larsen is how many times he hits a target. His conversion rate is exceptional. Ollie Watkins is hitting the target 43.4%. Alexander Isak is surprisingly the least with 43.2%. Then Strand Larsen stands at a huge 61.1%. And when it comes to shot creating actions, so creating actions for other teammates, Ollie Watkins ranks midway with 2.19. Now, most of his shots for other teammates come after he's had a shot. So when the goalkeeper saved it and somebody gets a rebound. And that's similar with Alexander Isak, who's averaging 3 shot creating actions per 90. 0.2 of those shot creating actions come after a shot. Now, surprisingly, Strand Larsen has actually got vision. He's only averaging 1.46 shot creating actions per 90, which is quite low, but 1.15 of them come after a live pass. So his ability to find a teammate in and around the box is actually underrated. So who should we look at first? Let's look at Strand Larsen first. So he's played 35 times in the Premier League, scored 14 goals, provided 4 assists across his career with Wolves. Wolves. Now, what type of striker is he? He's a physical frontman and he's reliable in the box. Now, his key traits, box movement. I studied him last night. I sat last night and I watched Strand Larsen and Ollie Watkins both. And these are the findings that I got. Box movement, he's excellent inside the box. He thrives from crosses and service. Genuine focus point, and almost something of a throwback striker or a classic number 9. He's a real handful for defenders inside the box. Now, on top of that, he's got exceptional positional sense. Most of his goals come from central zones, so he's alert to rebounds, second balls, he's got first-time finishes, and he's a big aerial presence. Last season, he leads the Premier League for conversion rate when it's headed shots converted into goals. So when it comes to that aerial presence, he's a real handful for defenders. Now, after watching him last night, the first thing I noticed, because when you look at Strand Larsen, you would expect him to be a static target man, holder player, and outlet for his team, but he's far more than just that. He's very rarely static. He's always looking to exploit channels, drift wide, move away from markers. In fact, he ranks second, only behind Brian and Brumo, for making runs with the outcome in order to receive a pass or create space for others. He had 848 in the Premier League last season. Brian and Bremo ranked top with 911. So what I'm trying to say is always on the move despite his height, despite his size. Now, might not be the quickest, he might not have the quickest turning circle, but his movement creates space for himself as well as others. Now, he also brings that lingo play. Now, it's a different lingo play to Alexander Isak. He's not going to get on the ball and be progressive in his carries, progressive in his passes. The more dealt with by Leons, so you need runners in and around him to really get the best out of them when it comes to in the build-up phase. But he's good at connecting the midfield to attack, using his frame to hold off defenders, and he's often acting as a pivot in a 4-3-3 system, which is what Newcastle United play, or a 4-2-3-1, which is a system that he played before he arrived at Wolves. Now, we all know Wolves play with a back 3, so if Newcastle did want to revert to a back 3, his profile certainly suits that role. So what are you not going to get from Strand Larsen that you probably will get with Alexander Isak? Well, he's not a dynamic ball carrier who's effective at creating chances for himself or others. He's a type of striker that relies on service to a certain degree. So if you don't provide him the service, he's probably going to go run a games with a cold shoulder. Now, he doesn't do it very often, but he has the ability to find a teammate in space. Now, one thing I will say, the inclusion of Anthony Elanga will really get the best out of somebody like Strand Larsen. Anthony Elanga ranked 4th for most crosses in the Premier League last season. Strand Larsen thrives off crosses. In fact, Wolves ranked 3rd for the most open play crosses in the Premier League last season. So it just goes to show how they got the best out of him. So if he was to arrive at Newcastle United, in order to get the best, very best out of him inside that penalty box, we need our wingers to provide for him. And that's, you do that by providing crosses, because he will eat them up all day. So now we're going to have a look and break down his shot locations and his shot selection. So he had an XG of 9.3, he scored 12 goals, so he overperformed his XG. He missed 13 big chances last season. Now, when you look at the face of this, he is the only player in the Premier League last season to have 100% record for shots outside the box. He had 2 shots outside the box and scored 2 goals. He is the only player in the Premier League to do that last season. But as you can see, most of his goals come in that central area, bar 1. So he does his best work in between the posts. Now, again, I know I say this every single episode, but just to break it down in case I have got any new viewers, the smaller the circle, the less of an XG it is. The bigger the circle, the better of an opportunity it is. So ideally, you don't want any big circles that aren't coloured in, because that means you're missing big chances. What's funny about these Strand Larsen links is, do you know my friend who's an agent? He's been saying since the beginning of the window we should sign Strand Larsen. Now we're linked to him and it might actually happen, you never know, because looks like Benjamin Šeško could go to Manchester United, so we will be looking for another striker. So what I do like about this is how he gets himself into good positions. I always say if you can get yourself into good positions, it's not about the ones you miss, because eventually we'll click in the gear. Now, he doesn't actually miss many big chances, and we'll be seeing that later on in the episode. But one thing I will take away from his game is those shots from those angles. He doesn't do very well when he's outside the posts. He does his best work when he's inside that penalty box, inside in between those posts. So if I'm a coach looking at that, I'll be telling them, get in between those sticks. Position yourself in between the centre back, so you're on the blind side of one of them and you're ahead of the other. So if the ball goes over the first centre back, you're in the pole position to attack that ball. That's exactly what I would be telling them, because he's got the physical profile to do so, and he's clearly got the ability to score goals. So what does Alexander Isak's shot map look like? And this is Alexander Isak from last season. As you can see, he's another one that overperformed his XG. Had an XG of 20, scored 23 goals, which is incredible. but he did miss 18 big chances. So looking at Strand Larsen's 13 probably isn't so bad, but you've got to think that Wolves don't create as much as what Newcastle do. That's why putting Strand Larsen in Newcastle's system, he's going to get more chances, therefore he might actually score more goals. But what I do love about Alexander Isak is he gets in that 6-yard box. That is something that Eddie Howe and Alexander Isak said they were working on at the beginning of the season, last season, should I say, and it's clearly paid off because he scored the majority of his goals in the 6-yard box. If you did that with Strand Larsen, he would be a handful for defenders. So it's about working on his positioning and his shot selections will just improve his output in terms of goals and hitting the target. And the next thing I want to see improving for Strand Larsen is getting more shots off. Now, again, that could be down to Wolves' style of play because they didn't really create much last season. But again, that's something that you've got to stick into his mind, get more shots off, because he was averaging less than 2 shots per 90 last season. And if he was to come to Newcastle United, you want him at least hitting 2.5 shots per 90. So how's he compared in a statistic point of view from Alexander Isak? Well, as you can see, I spoke about not getting involved in play much, not having many touches, not being a dynamic dribbler or a dynamic progressor. So that's something you've got to consider if he was to come to Newcastle United. So what I would be thinking here and visualizing, how can we get those statistics in terms of touches, progressive carries, progressive passes to level B instead of a C? Because at the minute it's a C. Alexander Isak is an A. We want to get him to B and then eventually an A. How do we get him to B? Well, there's a couple of ways you can do that. You can push Bruno a little bit more forward so he's got somebody to support, because you've got to think Strand Larsen hasn't got the technical ability in tight spaces like Alexander Isak has. So Alexander Isak is comfortable receiving the ball when he's isolated. Strand Larsen needs bodies around him. So in order to get him into the game and really bring his assets into the game, you need bodies moving off him. So whether that be Anthony Elanga coming inside and playing off Strand Larsen, whether that be Anthony Gordon coming inside, playing off Strand Larsen, or Bruno really supporting him in the attack, that's how I would be looking to get the best out of him in terms of output when it comes to his overall game. But when it comes to his statistics in terms of non-penalty goals, non-penalty XG, he's very impressive. So just to quickly recap what he would bring differently to Alexander Isak, Larsen offers less creativity, but more of an offensive chance finisher. So he doesn't get involved in the play, he finishes the play. But he is underrated for his movement, which suits a dynamic and rotational team. He's ideal for teams that need in physicality, focal point, or a box presence. Whereas Alexander Isak offers a more elegant, elite ball carrying style, can drift wide, rotate more with teammates, and link up better and has better creativity. Alexander Isak is more involved in the play. He's more calculated and layered in the build-up phase, and that's the difference between the two. Alexander Isak doesn't need a buzzer around him, whereas Strand Larsen probably does need a buzzer around him. And we've seen that with Matthias Cunha last season, and that's the point I'm trying to make. So again, I'll propose this question to you guys. Somebody like Strand Larsen, different type of player to Alexander Isak, but would you welcome it Newcastle United? Let me know in the comments. But now we'll move on to Ollie Watkins, and this guy certainly gets Eddie Howe excited, and the reason being is because he is Premier League proven. PLP, Eddie Howe's favourite 3 words. We all know Ollie Watkins is at Aston Villa. They're probably not likely to sell. He's 29, so he's going to have no upside value. So if you're buying Ollie Watkins, you're not going to make a profit off him. Now, he's played 185 times in the Premier League, and he's got an insane record, 75 goals, 36 assists. And let's be honest, he's been super consistent for Aston Villa. Now, the very first thing I want to say is Aston Villa play a similar style to Newcastle United. It's not identical, but it's very similar, where what they do is they play a 4-3-3 system like we do. They have their left winger tucking inside like Anthony Gordon does in support of the striker. Their right winger is the one who provides width. So Ollie Watkins is already used to having that left focal point coming inside and that right focal point providing width. So Aston Villa push their left back high at all times so their left winger can invert. And that is something similar to what Newcastle United do. So when it comes to the system, Ollie Watkins knows the system. And you can see that by his heat map. And in my breakdown of Ollie Watkins, I mentioned that he likes to exploit that left-hand channel. And as you can see, most of his heat map comes on that left-hand channel. And that's because he builds a partnership with the left winger. And that's something similar to what Alexander Isak does. Alexander Isak, a little bit more well-rounded, but his heaviest touches come in that left-hand channel. So when it comes to movement and fitting into the system, in terms of positional awareness, Ollie Watkins does something similar to what Alexander Isak does at Aston Villa. So let's break down Ollie Watkins. And you probably don't need me to tell you this because you've watched him probably 1,000 times. But his poacher's instincts blended with a modern play. He's a final third predator. What I like about him, he's got excellent fox in the box anticipations. One of my favorite things about Ollie Watkins is his movement. It's really, really intelligent. He excels at exploiting blind spots and making diagonal runs behind the defenders. This creates space for himself, but as well as teammates. Now, when it comes to his finishing, he's incredibly composed and he's confident that he can score all types of goals. He's probably his trademark goals is his low-driven shots, but we've seen him score chips, powerful strikes, and he needs little backlift to often catch keepers by surprise. And we've seen that in the semi-finals of the Euros where he scored for England. And we've seen this numerous times at Aston Villa. Now, what instantly stands out with Ollie Watkins is his movement. It is so intelligent, so good, and he's always on the move. Watkins made more off-ball runs while his team are in possession than any other player in the Premier League last season. So when it comes to his team getting in possession and him moving into space, he can really stretch defenses. He made 562 intensity runs last season. That was an average of 34 per 90, which is absolutely insane. And his movement is really unpredictable as well. So it really keeps defenders on their toes, but also breaks down structures. But he's definitely one for a movement that can disrupt the opposition's defense. So I would say his two biggest qualities is his finishing, despite him missing big chances. We all know he's a capable finisher, and you don't score 75 goals in the Premier League if you're not a capable finisher. And his positional awareness coupled with his movement. Now, one area for improvement, I actually like how he's become more selfish at Aston Villa. I think every single striker needs to be selfish at times. However, there are moments where he should be choosing the better option, trying to assist rather than shooting. On top of that, also his link-up play can do with a little bit of refinement. Right, so let's have a look at his shot locations and shot selections. But as you can see, he missed 27 big chances last season, but he did just overperform his XG. He was expected to score 15 goals. He scored 16 goals last season, so he did overperform his XG. Now, looking at that graphic, where does he score most of his goals? Once again, inside those posts. Those shots from those angles where he should be scoring because of quite big of a circle, he's not putting away. So he's not too comfortable from those angles. Where he does his best work is in between the posts. And this is probably where most strikers do their best work. So I don't understand why they don't get in these positions more often. But as you can see, there are a lot of big circles that aren't filled out, which shows me that he's either snatching at chances or overthinking the situation. Am I sitting here saying Ollie Watkins is a bad goal scorer? Absolutely not. We all know he can score goals and he will score you goals. But one thing I would like to see just added into his game is a bit more desire to get in the 6-yard box. Once again, if you look at Alexander Isak, he's hungry to get in that 6-yard box. And that's where the majority of his goals come from. Because once you get in that 6-yard box, it's incredibly difficult for the opposition to defend. And that's where they start to panic. But again, there's plenty of big circles that are wasted where he's taking shots too early. So what I would be saying Ollie Watkins here, I like how many shots you take per 90, which is 2.7, which is good. I'd rather 3, but 2.7 is good. You get in the box very often, which again is good because you're getting into positions. You've got a high XG, which is good. But the only thing missing is I want you to get close at the goal. I want you to use those predator instincts in the 6-yard box because that is where you're going to get your goals. You look at all the best goal scorers in the world. They score a lot of goals in and around that 6-yard box. But again, let's compare him to Alexander Isak. And as you can see, again, Alexander Isak is so well-rounded. But when it comes to winning aerial duels, progressive carries, completing these passes, Ollie Watkins is very, very impressive. So it shows that he does take care of the ball. And although he doesn't create as much as Alexander Isak, he ranks higher for assists, which shows that he's more decisive when he does create. So once again, guys, I'll propose a question to you. We may as well compare Ollie Watkins to Strand Larsen while we're here. I'll propose a question to you guys. Would you welcome any of these profiles to Newcastle United? Please drop your thoughts in the comments. But again, I think we should be looking outside the Premier League, to be honest. Plenty of players that we could sign that will help us next season. But I want to know your thoughts. Let me know, would you sign any of these two? And what do you make of this Alexander Isak situation? But once again, guys, I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you have, make sure you hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. And until next time, stay positive, stay safe, and away the lads.